Butler. This video is based on key insights from the book Butler by Salena Zito. Introduction: They shoot presidents in Butler. Salena Zito begins a story about a young George Washington and a dangerous trip he took in 1753. It wasn't a grand battle, but a quiet, scary moment that could have changed everything. Washington, just 21 years old, was sent by the British government to tell the French to leave land they both claimed in America. Think of it like two kids arguing over a toy, except this toy was a whole lot of land. The journey was incredibly hard. It was winter, with lots of snow and ice, and Washington had to travel through thick forests for 250 miles. He finally reached a French fort called Fort Le Boeuf and delivered his message. The French commander wasn't impressed and basically said, "We're staying." Washington realized the French weren't backing down and were actually building up their forces. He hurried back to deliver this important news. On the way back, Washington and his guide, Christopher Gist, were offered help by some French-allied Native Americans. Gist was suspicious, and for good reason. One of the Native Americans suddenly turned and shot at Washington. Luckily, he missed, but it was a very close call. Zito points out that if guns were more accurate back then, history could have been very different. Zito explains this near miss wasn't just a scary moment for a young man. It was a turning point. Had Washington been killed, the small fight that happened a few months later, the first real battle of what became the French and Indian War, might never have happened. That war, in turn, led to the American Revolution. Without Washington leading the colonists, America as we know it might not exist. It's a reminder that even small events can have huge consequences, and that one bullet could have changed the course of history. The author uses this story to illustrate how easily things can change and how important leadership can be, setting a stage for a discussion about unexpected turns in political events. Chapter 1: 1 Inch Away. Salena Zito found herself unexpectedly close to history on July 13, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania. She was there to interview former President Donald Trump, accompanied by her daughter Shannon and son-in-law Michael, but the day quickly turned into something far more dangerous. As Trump spoke on stage, 4 gunshots rang out, and Zito immediately knew they weren't fireworks. While others around her reacted with confusion, Zito's experience and awareness of firearms made the threat clear. The scene unfolded in a chaotic blur. Trump himself flinched and grabbed his ear, a streak of blood appearing on his face as he ducked for cover. Secret Service agents quickly formed a protective shield around him. Zito, initially frozen, watched as a Trump press advance man, Mitchell Picard, tackled her and her family to the ground, prioritizing their safety amidst the unfolding crisis. Picard's firm grip and visible shaking revealed the intense pressure of the moment. Zito observed the agents' hurried, muffled communication as they assessed the situation and prepared to move the president. The immediate aftermath was surreal. The crowd, surprisingly, didn't erupt in panic, with some even continuing to cheer. Zito noticed only one woman screaming, her cries raw and filled with fear. More shots were fired, and the agents confirmed the shooter was down, initiating a plan to evacuate Trump. Zito vividly remembers Trump's insistence on finding his shoes, even as an agent pointed out his bleeding head. Despite the danger, he rallied the crowd with chants of USA, 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 and fight, fight, fight. As the protective detail moved Trump away, a Secret Service agent briefly aimed his rifle at Zito and her family, but she felt surprisingly calm. Trump's hat fell during the commotion, and Zito watched as an agent rescued it from the gravel, only for it to fall again near her face. The motorcade departed, leaving Zito, Shannon, and Michael shaken but unharmed. Zito reflected on the morning's anxieties, getting to the event on time, now seeming trivial in comparison to what had just happened. The story then backtracks to detail the logistical challenges Zito faced leading up to the rally. She worried about arriving on time, securing press credentials, and finding childcare for her grandchildren. A last-minute change in plans meant the interview was postponed and then unexpectedly moved to Bedminster, requiring a flight after the rally. This series of events highlighted the unpredictable nature of covering a high-profile political figure like Trump. Zito's account emphasizes the atmosphere of a Trump rally, describing the enthusiastic supporters, decorated vehicles, and the sense of community. She noted the disconnect between mainstream media portrayals of Trump supporters and the people she encountered, hardworking individuals with strong beliefs. The day took an unexpected turn when Trump's team invited Zito and her family to travel with him to Bedminster for a more in-depth interview. This invitation, coupled with the near-assassination attempt, set the stage for a potentially significant story. The chapter concludes with the chilling realization that Trump's decision to use a chart during his speech and turn away from the crowd likely saved his life, as the shots fired were aimed at the spot where he had been standing moments before. Chapter 2, Middle of Somewhere, Butler, Pennsylvania. Salena Zito begins by painting a picture of Butler County, Pennsylvania, a place deeply rooted in American history and tradition. The area, settled after the Revolutionary War, embodies a hardworking spirit and a strong connection to the land. Zito traces her own family's history back generations in the region, highlighting a pattern of perseverance and a commitment to staying put a characteristic common to many families in western Pennsylvania. This sense of place, as Zito calls it, is central to understanding the political landscape she explores. The author explains that Butler County isn't a frequent stop for presidential candidates, yet Donald Trump chose it for a rally in 2020 and again in 2024. This wasn't a random decision, Zito argues. Trump understood the importance of connecting with communities like Butler, places often overlooked by politicians focused on big cities and national issues. She notes that Trump is the only sitting president to ever visit the county in its 224-year history. This demonstrates his understanding of the importance of connecting with voters who feel forgot. Zito contrasts the placed people of Butler County with the placeless, those who move frequently and lack deep ties to a specific community, like many journalists and Washington politicians. She believes this disconnect explains why many in the media and political establishment often misunderstand the concerns and values of people in places like Butler. These voters prioritize their communities and traditions over abstract ideas or global policies. The narrative then shifts to a pivotal moment: the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, in February 2023. Zito argues this event was a turning point for Trump. While President Biden initially remained silent, Trump visited the town, offering support and acknowledging the concerns of residents. This action, Zito contends, resonated deeply with people who felt ignored by the government. She describes how Trump's presence, even offering bottled water with his name on it, signaled that he saw them and understood their struggles. Zito details how Trump's visit to East Palestine helped him regain momentum after a period of declining popularity. She notes that his message of fighting for forgotten communities struck a chord with voters. This momentum carried into the 2024 election cycle, fueled by a sense that Trump understood and cared about the concerns of ordinary Americans. The author describes the 2024 presidential debate between Trump and Biden, noting that Biden's performance raised concerns about his cognitive abilities. This, combined with Trump's renewed connection with voters in places like Butler County, created an opportunity for a potential shift in the election. Zito concludes by suggesting that Butler County, a seemingly unremarkable place, held the key to understanding a larger political story. A story of a comeback fueled by a connection to place and a sense of being overlooked. The rally in Butler, she implies, could be the beginning of a surprising victory for Trump. Chapter 3, The Hand of God. The day began like any other campaign stop for Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, but quickly turned into something no one expected. Salena Zito found herself on the ground as Secret Service agents rushed Trump away after a shooting. The scene was chaotic, with people shouting both support for Trump and calling for medical help. Zito observed a man, resembling a character from the movie Field of Dreams, also covered in blood, and others with injuries, adding to the confusion. Following the immediate danger, Zito and other journalists were ushered into a tent, the same one Trump had just been using. While waiting, she noticed small details, like Trump's Diet Coke can and a blood-stained rag, that felt strangely normal amidst the extraordinary circumstances. The Secret Service, using many confusing acronyms, prepared to move everyone to a secure location. As the crowd dispersed, Zito was struck by the lack of panic, a quiet departure that reminded her eerily of the atmosphere on September 11, 2001. Inside the tent, a sense of shock settled over the group. Anna Moneymaker quietly cried, and Zito comforted her and Doug Mills, a photographer who had covered the events of 9/11. A member of Trump's press team was also deeply upset. Zito, pacing and trying to understand what was happening, noticed the stillness outside, a stark contrast to the chaos she anticipated. The Secret Service eventually allowed them to leave, revealing a scene guarded by state troopers and local police. The field, once filled with a massive crowd, was now mostly empty, save for discarded items like water bottles and an abandoned wheelchair with a fallen American flag. Zito's daughter placed the flag back in the ground. As they drove away, they learned from Sean Parnell, another speaker at the rally, that one person had died and 2 were seriously injured. Despite the tragedy, Zito observed a surprising sense of community in the parking lot, with people helping each other and sharing what little they had. Zito began writing her story while still processing the events. Later that night, she received a phone call from Trump himself. He was more concerned with her well-being and that of her colleagues than discussing the shooting. During a series of 7 subsequent calls, Trump repeatedly questioned why he had made last-minute changes to his speech, changes that he believed ultimately saved his life. He spoke of a possible divine intervention, a hand of God guiding his actions. Trump revealed he was completely rewriting his speech for the upcoming Republican National Convention, shifting from a vicious address to one focused on unity. He even shared this decision with Senator Lindsey Graham, who was with him on the plane to Milwaukee. Zito sensed a significant shift in Trump's perspective, a potential turning point for his campaign and the country. He expressed a desire to use the experience to bring people together, a surprising sentiment given his often divisive rhetoric. Zito, however, decided not to pursue the story further in Milwaukee, choosing to continue her coverage from Pennsylvania. Chapter 4, Shattered, the first 24 hours in Pennsylvania. The day after someone tried to harm Donald Trump and tragically killed Corey Comparator, a retired firefighter, reporters gathered in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. It was a quiet suburb where life had been turned upside down by events that happened 40 miles away at a campaign rally. Salena Zito describes a neighborhood holding its breath, with people staying inside and reporters trying to understand what had happened. The story centers on Thomas Crooks, a 20-year-old from Bethel Park who opened fire at the rally. He didn't succeed in seriously harming Trump, but his bullets killed Comparator and wounded 2 others. Zito details how Crooks positioned himself on a roof, waited for hours, and then fired shots. The author emphasizes the shockwaves this sent through a normal, everyday community. Zito paints a picture of Milford Drive, the street where Crooks lived, as a typical American neighborhood. She notes the well-kept homes and the sense of community that once existed, contrasting it with the isolation people feel today. A neighbor, Jerry, laments how people have become more withdrawn, spending more time with technology and less time connecting with each other. This sense of disconnection, Zito suggests, is part of the story. The investigation revealed Crooks had prepared extensively. Police found a Yar-style rifle, explosives, a drone, and ammunition in his car and home. He had practiced shooting at a local gun club, often on holidays instead of spending time with family. Zito highlights this detail as particularly unsettling, showing a young man seemingly dedicated to a sinister plan. The author then shifts focus to Butler, Pennsylvania, where Governor Josh Shapiro visited the farm's show grounds after the shooting. Shapiro recounts receiving the news and immediately focusing on the safety of Trump and those who were injured. He made a point of calling the Comparator family and speaking about Corey as a hero, a dedicated father, firefighter, and community member. Shapiro's actions demonstrate a desire to bridge political divides and acknowledge the human cost of the event. Zito notes Shapiro's surprising ability to connect with voters in traditionally Republican areas, like Butler County. He had previously saved a local steel plant, earning him respect from people who might not normally support a Democrat. This illustrates a broader point about the importance of politicians showing up in communities and understanding the concerns of everyday people. The narrative then moves to Sarver, Pennsylvania, and the outpouring of grief for Corey Comparator. Zito describes the scene at the Buffalo Township Volunteer Fire Company, where Comparator had been a dedicated member. Fire trucks were displayed with his gear, and the community was already beginning to honor his memory. The author details the emotional funeral procession, with lines of people showing their respect. Zito concludes by mentioning that Comparator's jacket was displayed at the Republican National Convention, a symbolic gesture linking the tragedy to the larger political landscape. The author suggests that the story of the shooting and the life of Corey Comparator represents a connection between the political world and the lives of ordinary Americans, a connection that is often overlooked. The chapter sets the stage for exploring how this event, and the feelings it evoked, might influence the upcoming 2024 election. Chapter 5, A Front Row Seat. Salena Zito opens this chapter with Erin Coper, a woman from Pennsylvania, preparing to speak at the Republican National Convention just before Donald Trump was to accept his party's nomination for president again. Coper's story was meant to show how crime had changed life in her hometown and hopefully influence voters. Trump's team believed her perspective was important. The convention's theme was Make America Safe Once Again, focusing on law and order and supporting police. The chapter highlights the dramatic backdrop of the convention, occurring only 2 days after a dangerous attempt was made on Trump's life. Zito details the energy in the hall as delegates reacted to seeing Trump, even though he didn't speak on the first 2 nights. His presence was felt everywhere, and he chose to have ordinary people like Coper share their stories alongside well-known politicians. The night saw nominations for Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. Zito vividly describes the nervous energy backstage, where Coper waited with prominent Republicans like Elise Stefanik, Steve Scalise, Mike Johnson, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis. A funny moment occurred when Coper excitedly announced Trump's arrival, prompting laughter. Sarah Huckabee Sanders offered Coper encouragement, urging her to be confident. As DeSantis finished speaking, Coper felt a surge of adrenaline before being introduced. She briefly chuckled at the surprising turn her life had taken. The author then shifts to Coper's personal story, tracing her family's journey from poverty in Northern Ireland to America. Her father, John Brown, faced hardship and sought a better life, eventually finding work and success in the United States. The family valued hard work and patriotism. Coper's upbringing was rooted in a strong Catholic and Democratic background, but she began to question those beliefs as her community struggled with the decline of the steel industry. Trump's message about the dignity of work resonated with her and her family, leading to a political shift. Zito explains that Coper and her family felt ignored by the Democratic Party, which seemed to focus on different priorities. They were drawn to Trump's America First approach and his emphasis on hard work and patriotism. Coper became increasingly distrustful of the mainstream media, feeling they were biased. This led her to do her own research and question long-held beliefs. She and her husband, Jacob, built a life in Pittsburgh, but became concerned about rising crime rates. A particularly disturbing incident involving a college intern, Sophia Mansing, being brutally attacked in Pittsburgh solidified Coper's resolve. The lack of response from elected officials and the visible increase in crime motivated her to get involved in politics. She initially struggled with voter registration efforts, but eventually found success, becoming a leader in the Allegheny County Council of Republican Women. Zito emphasizes that Cooper's story wasn't about Trump himself, but about a broader movement of people feeling left behind by the Democratic Party. Cooper's speech at the convention focused on the impact of Democratic policies on crime and the importance of restoring safety to communities like Pittsburgh. She highlighted the decline of the police force and the rise of crime, sharing her personal experiences and calling for change. Zito notes that Cooper's speech was well-received and resonated with the theme of the convention. The chapter concludes with a detailed account of Trump's acceptance speech, focusing on his emotional recounting of the assassination attempt. Zito describes the powerful atmosphere as Trump spoke about the near-death experience and the outpouring of support he received. He honored Corey Comparator, a man who died protecting his family during the attack, and emphasized the importance of unity and faith. Zito suggests that the convention showcased a coalition of voters, including former Democrats like Cooper, who were seeking change. Chris LaCivita predicted a shift in the campaign's strategy if Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, framing her as responsible for border security issues. The author ends by hinting at further developments to come. Chapter 6, Now the Fun Begins. The chapter opens with Chris LaCivita, Donald Trump's campaign manager, closely watching the reaction to Trump's long convention speech. Zito reveals that LaCivita noticed a surprising shift. Reports were surfacing that President Joe Biden might drop out of the race. This news, combined with the successful unity displayed at the Republican National Convention, seemed to unsettle Democrats and the media. The convention itself was a win for Trump's team, bringing together different parts of the Republican Party and showcasing everyday Americans. Just days before the convention's close, a shocking event occurred. While Trump was speaking at a rally in Pennsylvania, he was shot at. Zito details the chaos, with LaCivita receiving the news while coordinating convention details. Despite the immediate danger, Trump remained remarkably composed, even wanting to walk off the stage himself. LaCivita, a Marine veteran known for staying calm in crises, quickly assessed the situation and contacted Susie Wiles, another key campaign leader. Trump, surprisingly, joked with hospital staff after the shooting, leading LaCivita to believe a victory was certain, especially in a crucial state like Pennsylvania. Zito emphasizes the media's initial reaction to the shooting, which LaCivita found frustrating. He felt news outlets downplayed the severity of the attack, using vague language like incident instead of directly stating Trump had been shot. LaCivita aggressively pushed back against these reports, demanding accuracy. This highlights a recurring theme in the chapter: the tension between the Trump campaign and the media. Zito uses LaCivita's background, growing up in a working-class Pennsylvania family and serving in the military, to explain his no-nonsense approach. The shooting, according to Zito, became a turning point. The RNC used the event to contrast Trump's resilience with what they portrayed as Biden's weakness. They revamped the Republican platform, focusing on Trump's vision and discarding what they saw as outdated ideas. As Biden's poll numbers declined and pressure mounted for him to step aside, the Trump campaign prepared for a potential matchup against Vice President Kamala Harris. They had already created a memo outlining scenarios for Biden's departure, and they were ready to frame the election as a contest between Trump and the Biden-Harris administration. Zito details the growing belief within the Trump campaign that Biden would indeed withdraw. When Biden finally announced he would not seek re-election, LaCivita and Wiles were elated, anticipating an easier path to victory. They believed Harris would struggle to connect with voters, particularly in key swing states. The author illustrates this point through interviews with voters in Pennsylvania, like Shirley Hall, who had lost faith in the Democratic Party. The chapter concludes with the selection of Tim Walz as Harris's running mate, a decision Zito suggests was a misstep. Walz's comments about J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, calling him weird, were seen as a potential blunder, likely to resonate negatively with working-class voters. Zito suggests that the Democrats were underestimating the strength of Trump's appeal and the concerns of everyday Americans, setting the stage for a Trump victory. Through La Civita's perspective, Zito paints a picture of a campaign confident in its strategy and ready to capitalize on the unfolding political landscape. Chapter 7: The Return. Salena Zito found herself caught in a whirlwind after Donald Trump unexpectedly mentioned her name during a rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It happened just as she and her daughter, Shannon, were leaving to begin a 3-hour drive home. The sudden shout-out from the former president triggered a flood of texts, a testament to the attention Trump commanded and the respect he held for Zito's reporting. The author and her daughter shared a moment of surprised laughter, realizing the unusual situation they were in. The story quickly became about more than just a mention. Zito recalled a surprising conversation with Trump in 2020, during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. She had confessed to him, almost casually, that she wasn't a fan of public restrooms. Trump, surprisingly, remembered this detail and brought it up again at the rally, revealing a quirky connection between the two. This anecdote highlighted Trump's unusual ability to recall personal details and his willingness to engage in seemingly unimportant conversations. The rally itself took place against a backdrop of significant political change. Trump had recently been the target of an assassination attempt, and the campaign was intensely focused on Pennsylvania as a crucial battleground state. Zito observed a noticeable shift in public sentiment following the shooting, with more people openly displaying their support for Trump. She noticed Trump signs appearing in unexpected places, in diverse neighborhoods, and even areas where he had previously struggled to gain traction. This suggested a growing, and perhaps underestimated, wave of support. Zito pointed out a disconnect between the national media's portrayal of the electorate and the reality on the ground. She argued that many journalists, based in Washington, D.C. and New York City, lacked a genuine understanding of the concerns and values of voters in places like Pennsylvania. They often relied on stereotypes and failed to appreciate the importance of factors like faith, gun ownership, and a strong connection to local communities. This disconnect, Zito believed, led to inaccurate reporting and a misreading of the political landscape. The author emphasized the importance of place and tradition for many voters in the Rust Belt. Unlike the highly mobile elites on the coasts, these voters were deeply rooted in their communities, often staying within a few miles of where they grew up. This sense of place shaped their views on issues like globalization and climate change, and it explained their strong attachment to a way of life that felt threatened by outside forces. Trump, Zito argued, understood this connection and appealed to voters by acknowledging their values and concerns. Zito's observations were reinforced by conversations with ordinary people, like Chrissy Eckenrode, a young mother who had previously been hesitant to display her support for Trump. After the assassination attempt, she felt emboldened to wear a Trump hat in public, demonstrating a newfound willingness to stand up for her beliefs. This sentiment, Zito noted, was becoming increasingly common. Before the rally, Zito and Shannon had a scheduled interview with Trump. During their conversation, Trump steered clear of discussing the assassination attempt, focusing instead on his vision for the future. He spoke about restoring the American dream, addressing issues like inflation and the border, and giving people hope. He also revealed his strategy for connecting with voters, emphasizing the importance of showing up in places that other candidates ignored. Zito observed Trump's genuine engagement with supporters during a pre-rally meet and greet. He took the time to hug and shake hands with each person, asking about their lives and expressing genuine interest in their stories. This contrasted sharply with the image of Trump often portrayed in the media. The author noted that Trump's focus on the middle class and his understanding of their struggles were key to his appeal. As Zito and her daughter drove home, the author's phone continued to buzz with messages, a sign of the story's growing impact and the continued attention surrounding Trump's campaign. Chapter 8: The Son of Appalachia. Salena Zito's account centers on a journey through Pennsylvania, observing the political landscape leading up to the 2024 election, with a surprising focus on the attempted shooting of Donald Trump and its impact. Zito begins with a drive across the state, noticing a strong show of support for Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance through homemade signs, a sign of deeper enthusiasm than simply picking up a pre-made sign. She observes a disconnect between the media's portrayal of Trump voters and the reality on the ground, noting that simply understanding voters in key Pennsylvania counties is key to understanding the national mood. The initial plan was to cover Kamala Harris's campaign rally in Philadelphia, but a shift occurred when news broke that Harris had chosen Tim Walz as her running mate instead of Pennsylvania's governor, Josh Shapiro. Zito reflects on Trump's understanding of place, his strategic choice to hold a rally in a traditionally Democratic city like Philadelphia to show willingness to compete everywhere, even where Republicans usually don't bother. She points out that the media often misses the subtle shifts happening in voter coalitions. Zito then details her long history with both Vance and Trump, recalling her early recognition of Trump's potential in 2016 and her initial conversations with Vance after the publication of his book, Hillbilly Elegy. She describes Vance as someone who understood the concerns of working-class voters, a perspective often overlooked by the media. She notes that Walz's folksy image, while appealing to some, felt inauthentic, a plaid attempt to connect with voters without truly understanding their values. Zito remembers covering Walz early in his career and how his political positions had changed over time. The narrative takes a turn when Zito decides to cover Vance's rally instead of Harris's, sensing a more compelling story. She recalls the attempted shooting of Trump weeks earlier and how it fueled even greater enthusiasm among his supporters, evidenced by the fight, signs she observed. Vance's rally in Philadelphia was a deliberate contrast to Harris's event, focusing on issues like border security and the opioid crisis. Zito highlights Vance's ability to connect with voters on a personal level, sharing his own family's struggles with addiction. Zito criticizes the media's obsession with a seemingly minor comment Vance made about female Democratic politicians, arguing that it distracted from the real issues voters cared about. She emphasizes Vance's authenticity and his ability to speak directly to the concerns of working-class voters, contrasting this with Walz's more polished and calculated approach. She recounts a story of Vance stopping to help a student during a blood draw, illustrating his genuine compassion. The author details Vance's response to the attempted assassination of Trump, noting how it galvanized his supporters. She describes a moment where Vance playfully confronted Harris on the tarmac, highlighting his willingness to engage with the press and challenge the narrative. Zito emphasizes Vance's deep connection to his roots and his ability to connect with voters on a personal level, recalling his work in East Palestine, Ohio, after the train derailment. She describes how he wasn't just making a political visit, but genuinely connecting with the people affected. Zito concludes by reflecting on the importance of understanding the changing political landscape and the disconnect between the media's portrayal of voters and the reality on the ground. She recounts a conversation with Vance's mother, Beverly Akins, about her journey to sobriety and the impact it had on their family. Zito suggests that Vance's ability to connect with voters stems from his own personal experiences and his genuine empathy for the struggles of everyday Americans. The author implies that the near-assassination of Trump, coupled with Vance's authentic connection with voters, played a significant role in securing Trump's victory in the 2024 election. Chapter 9, There Is No There There. Salena Zito details a campaign season where the story wasn't always what it seemed, especially regarding Kamala Harris's efforts in Pennsylvania, a crucial state for winning the presidency. The chapter begins with news leaking about Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, starting their campaign tour in Pittsburgh, signaling the importance of Pennsylvania. However, Zito quickly reveals a disconnect between the public image of a grand tour and the reality of a carefully controlled, often hidden, campaign. A major issue that emerged was scrutiny of Walls's past claims, with questions raised about exaggerations regarding his military service, travels to China, and even personal experiences like IVF treatment. While these stories circulated in some news outlets, they didn't gain much attention in mainstream media. Zito's investigation showed a pattern of secrecy surrounding Harris and Walls's events. Initial reports of a large rally in Pittsburgh turned out to be a small, invite-only gathering at the airport, primarily for union members of the SEIU. This raised questions about why the campaign wasn't openly engaging with the public. Zito's attempts to find details about the events were met with silence from key Democratic figures in Pennsylvania, even those she'd known for years. The campaign's strategy seemed to be about control rather than connection. A planned bus tour felt more like a series of staged photo opportunities, like a stop at Primanti Bros restaurant where regular customers were asked to leave before the candidates arrived. A visit to a Sheetz gas station was particularly awkward, given the Biden administration was actually suing the company at the time. The campaign's caution seemed driven by a fear of protests, particularly regarding the situation in Palestine. Zito notes a sense of disconnect between the campaign's actions and the concerns of everyday Pennsylvanians. Harris and Walls largely avoided direct engagement with voters, opting for controlled environments. This was especially noticeable in Beaver County, a traditionally Democratic area that had shifted towards supporting Trump. The narrative shifts to the broader election landscape with the unexpected endorsement of Donald Trump by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Zito argues that the media underestimated the significance of this endorsement, particularly its appeal to working-class and suburban voters who were frustrated with the status quo. This endorsement seemed to deflate some of the momentum Harris had gained. Harris's first major interview with CNN was seen as underwhelming, with the author noting she was vague and avoided direct answers on key issues. The interview highlighted concerns about Walls's past misstatements as well. The campaign then announced a return to Pittsburgh surrounding the Labor Day parade. But again, details were scarce and access was limited. Zito found a similar pattern of secrecy and control. The author emphasizes the contrast between Biden's past enthusiastic appearances at the Labor Day parade and his more subdued presence this time around, reflecting his weakened position. Harris's attempts to connect with voters felt forced and inauthentic, exemplified by a visit to Penzeys Spices, a store known for its owner's strongly anti-Republican views. Zito points out the irony of Harris speaking about unity while visiting a business that actively promoted division. Zito concludes that the campaign seemed to be running out the clock, avoiding risks and hoping to rely on existing support. She suggests that the campaign underestimated the importance of connecting with voters and addressing their concerns. The author's observations, combined with insights from political strategists, paint a picture of a campaign that was out of touch with the realities of Pennsylvania and ultimately unable to effectively counter Trump's appeal. The chapter ends with a sense of foreboding, hinting at the eventual outcome of the election. Chapter 10, as I was saying. Salena Zito begins her account on October 5, 2024, a date heavy with significance. Just months prior, Donald Trump had been the target of a shooting at the Butler Farm Show Complex in Pennsylvania, an event that tragically took the life of firefighter Corey Comparator. Despite this, Trump was returning for another rally, and Zito felt compelled to be there, waking up incredibly early to prepare for live television segments. She had previously advised Trump that returning to Butler would be beneficial for both him and the community, a place where he consistently found strong support. Zito details the palpable energy building around the rally, even in the early morning hours. Roads were lined with Trump flags and supporters, some already tailgating. The sheer number of people created traffic jams, but Zito intentionally chose to park with the rally goers, wanting to fully experience the atmosphere. She observed a powerful sense of joy and unity among the crowd, a feeling that something important was unfolding. This enthusiasm reminded her of a recent rally in Indiana Pennsylvania, where Trump had connected with local farmers concerned about the impact of the Biden administration's energy policies. The Indiana rally showcased Trump's willingness to engage directly with people in rural areas, traveling backroads and greeting supporters along the way. Zito recounts a moment where Trump unexpectedly purchased groceries for a family struggling with rising costs, even handing the clerk a $100 bill. This gesture, she notes, was not just for the family, but also a message to the media, demonstrating his loyalty to his supporters. Zito also highlights Trump's ability to remember and acknowledge those who supported him, like mentioning Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita by name, despite negative press coverage. Back in Butler, Zito encountered Mitchell Pickard, a colleague who had also been present during the shooting, and they shared a deeply emotional reunion. She then conducted interviews for Fox and Friends, noting the enthusiastic response from the crowd. The presence of Corey Comparator's firefighter jacket and helmet at the rally served as a poignant reminder of the tragedy, but also of the community's resilience. Zito spoke with veteran Sean Parnell, who had been near Comparator when he was shot, and he described the event as a revival. Before the rally, Zito had a rare opportunity to speak with Trump backstage. He expressed feeling good about returning to Butler, acknowledging the emotional weight of the event and the importance of honoring Comparator. He also discussed the enthusiastic support he was receiving, particularly from Hispanic voters, and his commitment to addressing the concerns of farmers and workers in Appalachia. He shared his thoughts on Elon Musk, who was also attending the rally, praising Musk's contributions to innovation and his support for Trump's campaign. Zito observed a strong connection between Trump and Musk, both seen as risk-takers and builders who resonated with the American spirit. She noted that Musk's presence challenged conventional media narratives as he appealed to working-class voters. The rally itself was a powerful display of support, with an estimated 60,000 people in attendance. Trump's speech included a moment of silence for Comparator, accompanied by a moving rendition of Ave Maria. Zito concludes that the event signaled a turning point in the election, demonstrating Trump's ability to connect with voters and overcome adversity. She believed the rally's energy would continue to build, culminating in a strong showing at the polls, and she predicted that Trump's willingness to engage with everyday Americans would be a key factor in his eventual victory. Chapter 11, There Will Never Be Another One Like Him. Salena Zito describes a strange contrast during the final stretch of the 2024 election. While news outlets were filled with stories comparing Donald Trump to dictators and questioning his respect for the military, Trump himself was flipping burgers at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. This move, Zito explains, wasn't just a publicity stunt. It was a clever way to connect with everyday Americans and poke fun at Vice President Kamala Harris, who had claimed to have worked at a McDonald's but couldn't prove it. Zito notes that the media and Democrats were quick to criticize, but those who were actually at the McDonald's saw it as a fun and relatable moment. Political scientist Paul S. Rasick pointed out that Trump seemed to be enjoying himself, and so were the people watching. This event highlighted a disconnect between how the media portrayed Trump and how his supporters experienced him. While the press focused on accusations of fascism, Trump was showing a playful side. The author details how, for 10 days leading up to the election, news organizations repeatedly labeled Trump a fascist. Prominent figures like Kamala Harris and Mark Cuban echoed this sentiment. Even a Trump rally at Madison Square Garden drew comparisons to Nazi rallies, despite the venue's history of hosting events for multiple Democratic presidents. Zito argues that this constant barrage of negative coverage felt disconnected from the reality on the ground. She believes reporters relied too much on activists and didn't spend enough time talking to actual voters. Zito's own observations in Pennsylvania challenged the narrative that Trump was losing support among Hispanic voters, particularly in Allentown, a city with a large Puerto Rican population. While some reports claimed outrage over a joke made by a comedian at a Trump rally, Zito found a large, enthusiastic crowd of supporters, many of Puerto Rican descent, eager to see the former president. She observed that the protest was small, organized by a specific group, and didn't reflect the views of many residents. Meanwhile, Zito points out a series of missteps by the Biden campaign. During a speech, President Biden called Trump supporters garbage, a remark that received significant backlash. The press attempted to downplay the comment, but it resonated with Trump's base. Zito describes how this incident, combined with Trump's McDonald's visit, shifted the focus away from the accusations of fascism and towards Biden's own controversial statement. People even started using garbage-themed costumes for Halloween, and Trump playfully drove a garbage truck in Michigan. Zito believed Trump was going to win Pennsylvania, and by extension, the election. She predicted a victory margin of around 2 percentage points. Despite skepticism from some, including a respected pollster, she remained confident in her assessment, based on her extensive conversations with voters. She recounts attending Trump's final rally in Pittsburgh, where she was struck by the diverse crowd and the enthusiastic support for the former president. The presence of Roberto Clemente Jr., the son of the legendary Pittsburgh Pirates player, signaled a significant endorsement from the Puerto Rican community. On election night, Zito was at a Republican gathering in Pittsburgh, closely monitoring the results. She observed that Trump was winning key counties by larger margins than in 2016. As the night progressed, she became convinced of his victory, and the Associated Press eventually called the race in his favor. Zito emphasizes that the election wasn't won by elites or talking heads, but by everyday people, cosmetologists, waitresses, and janitors, who felt ignored by the political establishment. Zito concludes that Trump's success wasn't about him creating a new coalition of voters, but rather recognizing and tapping into an existing one. She argues that the Republican Party has become the party of the working class, while the Democrats have become the party of the elites. She believes that Trump's unconventional style and willingness to challenge the status quo resonated with voters who felt left behind by both parties. The author suggests that this shift in the political landscape is unlikely to reverse anytime soon. Chapter 12, The Reckoning. Salena Zito begins by recounting the frantic 911 call made by Matthew Crooks on July 13, 2024, after his son, Thomas, went missing. This seemingly local story quickly connects to a much larger event, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Thomas Crooks would later be identified as the shooter. The initial news coverage was sparse, taking months to surface, and Zito highlights the delay as a symptom of a bigger problem. The core of Zito's narrative centers on the findings of a bipartisan task force led by Congressman Mike Kelly and Representative Jason Crow. Their report revealed significant failures by the Secret Service in securing the rally location. Specifically, the area around the American Glass Research Complex wasn't properly secured or monitored, allowing Crooks to access a vantage point from which he fired 8 shots. The task force detailed miscommunication, lack of manpower, and a misunderstanding of responsibilities among security personnel. Zito emphasizes that these weren't isolated incidents, but stemmed from deeper issues in leadership and training within the Secret Service. Zito then shifts focus to the media's role, or lack thereof, in thoroughly investigating the events surrounding the shooting and its connection to the 2024 election. She points to the decline of local journalism and the rise of clickbait-driven news as factors contributing to a lack of in-depth reporting. She notes that the national media seemed more interested in framing the election as a reaction to resentment towards institutions than in investigating the actual security failures and the motivations behind the attack on Trump. Congressman Kelly's personal connection to the event, he was present at the rally and knew the firefighter who was killed, underscores the gravity of the situation. Kelly believes the election results were a direct response to the failures of both the Secret Service and the press, a reckoning for institutions that had lost public trust. Zito echoes this sentiment, arguing that voters were signaling a loss of confidence in established systems. Zito illustrates the changing media landscape with examples like the shutdown of newspaper endorsements by Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post, and the overwhelming popularity of Joe Rogan's podcast. She explains that Rogan's 3-hour interview with Trump likely had a greater reach and impact than traditional news coverage. She argues that the media attempted a psychological operation to portray Trump negatively, but voters were no longer as easily swayed. The author highlights a Pew Research Center survey showing declining trust in the media, contrasting it with continued trust in local news organizations. She traces this decline back to events like Watergate and the Vietnam War, but emphasizes that the 2024 election marked a turning point. Zito concludes that the election results demonstrated that the national media no longer controls the narrative, and a reckoning is underway for the industry. The story isn't just about a shooting. It's about a shift in power and a demand for accountability from institutions that have lost their way. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.